Hello and welcome to the Luchi and Mutton's podcast. I am Surabhi, your host, and I run Luchi and Mutton's Dog Behaviour and Nutrition, a canine care practice that's based out of India. I work very closely with dog parents across the world, helping them meet their dog's dietary and behavioral needs through scientific, holistic, empathetic, and dog-centric methods. Welcome to episode 21. I have two fabulous guests on this episode, and I'm so excited to share this with you. One of them is a French award-winning photographer, artist, and animal advocate, mostly known for her series of dog portraits, Wet Dog, and my favorite, Pitbull Flower Power. Sophie Gamand is a published author, speaker, and animal chaplain, and I'm so excited that she could join me for this episode. Joining her is Sindhoor Pangal, Director of BHARCS Education. She's a canine behavior consultant and myotherapist, currently completing her master's in anthrozoology from the University of Exeter, and is known for her remarkable, eye-opening work on the lives of free-living dogs. In this episode, the three of us chat about dogs, politics, gender, nature, and ecology, and everything at its intersection. I hope you enjoy this episode and do let me know what you think of it. So actually, Sophie, I want to start with you. And I think, again, your work is absolutely just fabulous, right? And so for me particularly, and I'm going to start heavy with it, with the episode. I think, with your work, I love the focus on capturing the dog for who they are and not what they are, right? And I think it seems like that's it's obviously a style. It's something that comes through with every piece of work that you create, and I think it's something that is so unique to you. And I think that what I find so powerful about that when I receive your work, when I witness that work, is this is not just. It doesn't seem like it's just an artistic style. It seems like there is a certain intentionality, there is a certain belief system that is coming through your work. And so, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about that thought process.
Yeah, actually, so when I started taking photos of dogs, and especially shelter dogs, which was my big focus right from the start, I would look around dog photography, and often they were an object of photography, or they were photographed for their bodies, they're jumping, they're doing dog things. And for me, was important was to capture their personality, because most of my photos were adoption portraits. So I wanted that emotional connection. But also I wanted to give them their dignity back in a moment that was very difficult for them. They lost everything. They're sitting in a cage. It's a stressful environment. They don't get to really be themselves anymore, and they are in limbo. And so I wanted to have these portraits that were beautiful, elevated, dignified. And back then I didn't have the words for it, but now I'm a little bit more educated. And I think it was also about body autonomy. It was about giving them their agency back a little bit. And so sometimes the photos would come, weird, maybe, for lack of a better word. I had one where the doggy was blind and she kept facing the wall instead of me. So I just photographed her like that. And the photo was her from the back, and she was a chubby pug. The front, actually, she was blind. She had teeth everywhere. It was it was a bit of a mess. So that was her adoption profile, and she got adopted with that photo. And sometimes the dogs are worried and they look worried. And I've been criticized by other dog photographers for showing stressed dogs. But for me, it's like, no, this is their life. This is their moment. This is what they chose to share with me in that moment. And I want to honor that. I don't need them to be perfect, well-behaved, happy. I just want them to be what they are in that moment and capture that and serve them in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think I heard you talk about something very similar, where you spoke about, just feeling a sense of responsibility towards capturing their personality with your frame, as opposed to, what the dog should be like. And I think that so much of that resonates with the BHARCS way as well. As soon as Sophie said autonomy and agency, I was like, Sindhoor.
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit about that?
No, that would be difficult talking a little bit about it because there's so much, but I'll try. Um, just this morning, I had a call with Saujanya because we're doing this whole uh, project on personality perception, how people perceive dogs' personalities. And one of the big objects of this exercise is to then work it into a adoption model, so that people who want to get dogs adopted now go through a process where they get sensitized to the idea of a dog's personality, right? And so I love this. I absolutely love what Sophie's talking about, because she's sort of pointing out exactly what we're kind of aspiring to as well. And that's kind of what I studied as the run up to this project, which is most or rather a large percentage of adoption failures happen not because the dog's not the right breed, or the dog's not trained right, or the dog's not whatever. It's really about that lack of connection. There is there is a mismatch of expectations. There's a lack of connection. And instead of looking at adoptions as like Sophie said, I think we are looking at animals too much as objects. So shopping for objects, instead of looking at it that way, this is my category list, this is the catalog. Oh, do you have a dog that meets us? We really need to move that conversation from there, because that's not how we live with animals. We share our lives with them. They're in our homes. They become part of our family. We don't even have words to express the kind of relationship that we are in with them. It's so deeply personal, and at the same time there is this power structure there. And then human animal relationships touch upon a certain aspect, sometimes even get spiritual. It's just a remarkable relationship that we have, and we're going to go shop for it. That doesn't make sense, right? And so we want to move that conversation, and we want to when people are adopting dogs, we want to put them through this exercise where we sensitize them to the idea of a personality and encourage them to look at this more differently. And I think that's what Sophie's work is also doing. And so it's just so exciting that so many of us are coming at the same point but in different directions, with kind of carrying it in different ways. But I think we're all saying the same thing, which is that they're individuals. See them for what they are. Build a bond, nurture that bond, right? Uh, that is what, at the end of the day, this is all about. It's to feel it. It's just to feel it. And you need to be in a place to feel it. You're not going to feel it if the coat is shiny, or, the
Yeah.
dog's structure is so on and so forth. So, yeah, I can go on and on about this. So I'm going to stop here.
Yeah, but it's true. I always told people, like, you're about to meet your best friend, your confidant, the person, your partner in life.
Yeah.
And I used to live in New York, where a lot of people were single and their dogs were really everything, and I'm like, how do you want to meet that person?
Yeah.
Do you go in with an open heart? What are you looking for? Or are you just going to check boxes of, like, it needs to be a certain size, it needs to be a certain look, it needs to make me money as an influencer on Instagram, whatever, your criteria is. So it's your best friend. You're going to share so much with that person/dog.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, right? Because I also feel like, Sophie, like with your work, like it's almost like a little bit of a rebellion to, I think, like the commodification of finding relationships, right? I think if I think about today, like in the modern world, when we have, apps like Tinder and Bumble and Hinge, where people are looking for connection, I think it does come down a lot to what is the sellability of your profile, right? It connection comes in much later. Your personality comes in much later. Your beliefs, value systems come in much later. And I think so much of that, and we speak so much about this at BHARCS, which is how we view our relationships in life with people is also what influences our relationships and the quality of attachment with our dogs as well, right? And so it feels like in this world where we're commodifying connections and really looking at who can market and sell their their connectionability, right? Like who can what that is. I feel like your work is a little bit of a rebellion to that idea, to saying, hey, actually, I'm not going to go down that path. I'm actually going to capture what the dog is showing me in this moment, which also seems very integral to who they are. And again, I think like staying away from what they need to be, what they should be, which I think is also really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, also humans are very visual, so they will latch onto an image. And I used to work with a rescue that most of their dogs were brought from Puerto Rico to New York and other places. Most of the dogs would be adopted even before they landed, based on the photo, on the story they had seen on social media, right? And people had projected, oh, this is my dog. I don't know that I could. I need to meet a dog in person to really feel that connection. But we are a visual species, so we will latch onto an image. And I think that's where the shelter staff and volunteers have to be very honest, and sometimes brutally honest, to say, hold your horses, this is not the dog for you. And I work with a shelter here. They have a dog that is a purebred, and a lot of people want that dog, but he's a bit naughty and he's not good with kids. And this family insisted, no, but we want this dog. We've had this breed forever. And the shelter was like, no, this is not the dog for you. And sure enough, it didn't work out. And so I think we need responsible shelter staff and volunteers, and we need the public to respect their input, when it comes to that. So the visual is the hook to get people through the door, but then we have a lot of work to do. As Sindhu was saying, like people need to understand that it's not an object you're bringing home, a cute little thing.
Yeah, Sindhu, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, it's quite a remarkable balance to strike, right? Because, like Sophie mentions, on one hand, people are really visual, and so you take these powerful pictures, and you have people kind of rushing to pick them up, and so you want to make sure that you're not objectifying them, you're not commoditizing them, and you're presenting sort of a real version of who they are and draw into their personality. And so what you see kind of repeatedly with a lot of work like this that we do, where we're trying to get down to the individual, is how much of an integration and hand holding that happens through various different aspects. Here is a person who's taking a photograph, and then there is, working with shelter staff to say it's not just this, there is more that happens, and then there's going to be support after that. And I think a large part of my kind of I'm irked with where the industry is at today is because of two problematic things, right? And one is how animals are being commodified, and that's the industry, that's the problem, uh, so talking about them as car models, as desirable breeds, and sort of, here is my 2024 version of so and so breed, right? Like a car model coming out. So there is that commodifying, and then there is there's also sort of professionals being so narrow and siloed, they don't have a wide enough view of things. Like you said, a lot of times the way we connect with dogs is the way we connect with human beings, and so there is so much more to a life with a dog, and you can't say I'm just going to do this and then not look past that. And I think one of the things that has struck me a lot about Sophie in this has been the way she's thinking past it. It's not just I put up a photograph, I get these views, and hey, great, right? Like sell them and but it's really the full story. And so she and I kind of stay up. It's late in the night for me, it's early in the morning, and we're chatting, and the frustrations that happen with it, because the investment into the stories is so much more, and the frustration that happens in there. And so we sit and chat, and that's how our friendship has blossomed. So yeah, we can go on and on about some of those things.
Yeah, I think this is a really good segue, because I feel like we've talked about commodification, we've talked about desirable breeds, we've talked about personalities of dogs, and I think it's a good segue into talking about pitbull flower power. And for me, like that's like the big piece for me in this conversation with you, Sophie, and I'm sure that you are tired of hearing how amazing that entire campaign was. Like, oh my God, like, and I have to tell you this, that I think the campaign released in 2014, which is, I think, which was still a time here in India where we were, I think, we had just perhaps experienced like an explosion of pit bulls, especially in the northern part of the country, and we'd seen a lot of that. And for us, an indicator was really how they were showing up in shelter systems. And I think that at that point in time, of course, like education was limited, awareness was limited, and so I think a lot of us, including myself, fed into a lot of like sensationalist views of what the breed was. And for me, a turning point in that thinking was watching your campaign on Pitbull Flower Power. Like, it blew my mind. And I think it was the first time that I saw this breed of dogs in such a different light. And I think it stayed with me so powerfully because it allowed me to think about, oh, wait, maybe there's something not right about the way that the media has constructed this breed. And I do want to share that it, I think, paved the way for so many things, because my second dog that I adopted was a pit bull who absolutely changed my life, and was, I think, one of my most intimate, secure relationships ever. And it's allowed me to go on to like foster so many pitties and advocate for them in very different ways. And so I do want to take this moment to just thank you for that incredible piece of work, because it was just transformative. Yeah.
Well, you're gonna make me cry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. It's very interesting for me to hear that, and especially after so many years. And people will tell me, because the project went viral immediately. And so for the first couple of years, it was a nonstop flow of messages, and everybody wanted a piece of the project, and it was a whirlwind, right? So 10 years later, to hear stories like yours, it's really touching. It's very special. And I will say, that's how I went into this project too. I had moved to New York, and I would see a lot of pit bulls in shelters, not really understanding yet the scale of the issue. I just knew in France they were kind of banned, and like we had the same negative image of them. And so each time the shelter staff would bring a pit bull on set for me to photograph, I'd be like, oh, okay, next, and not wanting to engage. And I decided to approach them with innocent, naive eyes, as if I had never heard of them before, because I thought I'm not serving them by being afraid of them, even before I get to know them, right? So this is what prompted me to do this project in the first place. I thought I just want to make a project that, what if we didn't know anything about them? What if we didn't have that negative image? What if I'd never heard anything in the media about them? How would I perceive them? How would I, if I change the way we see them, can I change the way we treat them? So going back to the visual aspect, right? So yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, because I was afraid of them going into this project. And, through the 10 years I've worked with them and on this project, I have ups and downs, and I have questions that come up, when people express prejudice against them. I have to constantly remind myself, I'm talking about individual dogs, and this is how we need to talk about dogs. We need to stop talking about breeds. We need to stop making blanket statements. And if you go back to the individual, which is what my work is about, and which is why every dog got a very unique flower crown that I never reused, it had to be very individual for every dog. There was a story, a crown, a color scheme, something that was just theirs, right? And that's what I always have to remind myself. It's the individual. We have to stop making those blanket statements.
Yeah, and I think for me, like with the campaign, I think two things that really struck out to me. And again, of course, over the years, I think I have matured and evolved to understand the intricacies of the campaign as well, as much as I can. But I think two things that really stayed with me was, one, I think the use of the flower crown. I think that was just so incredible, because I think that there is something so, to me, like it almost felt like a return to like their softness as dogs, and a return to what is natural. as opposed to
Right.
what is artificial and man-made, right? I also think that what was incredible was that it took a woman to see that perspective. And, I think like so unabashedly, I think bring that softness forward, right? And I think it was such an interesting, I feel like it was such an interesting juxtaposition, right? Because you're seeing this breed who has been, sensationalized for being vicious and aggressive and, like killer, right? And then there is just so much softness and warmth and love that exudes from each of those photographs. And I thought that that was such an interesting, like an interesting and a really like complex interplay of lots of different things together.
Yeah, what's funny too is I'm a gothic girl. Like I never in a million years, like I just got these pink headphones because I was like, let's just be girly for once. So flower power was so out of my norm. I never thought I would ever create work like that. And as a matter of fact, I thought I was going to make 5 images and move on with my life. And I had much darker work that I wanted to create. And so it really took me by surprise. Going back to that feminism and femininity and all these themes, like I really struggle with that. And growing up, I grew up in France in a very patriarchal structure where only the boys in my family were allowed to sit at the table, make jokes, hang out. We were here to clean. At the end of the meal, my dad would go, "Come on, girls, just clean the table." And there was a lot of pressure on that. And I didn't want to be a woman. As a child, I wished I was born a boy. And there was a lot of, um, feminism came much later in my life. And so, figuring out what it means to be a woman and can I be myself and be a woman and be respected. And being a dog photographer, uh, being a woman photographer is already a mess. Being a dog female photographer in the world of photography, which is also very patriarchal, very male dominated. I've heard it all. And I've had some really very problematic comments, made, and my work hasn't been respected in some venues where it should have been, So I've contended with that, and so with flower power, going back to that, the idea of the flower crowns was to infuse more softness and I didn't realize, but femininity to it. I thought the way we see pit bulls is a very masculine energy, very rough. There's studs, on their collars and spikes and chains and cropped ears. It's this very masculine, toxic masculinity, really. And so I wanted to do the exact opposite of that. So it's a little bit on the nose, I guess, to use flowers and soft pastel tones to convey feminine energy. But most of the pit bull rescuers I knew were women, often single women, and I think as a community, we were trying to reclaim the image of the pit bull as saying, yeah, we can be a gentle woman and have the beast at the end of our leash in the street of Brooklyn or New York. And it's okay. So it was interesting to capture the pit bull in that battle of gender and the tension between toxic masculinity and, I don't know, feminism.
Yeah. Sindhoor, lots of themes.
Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable to see the parallels, right? Because so we're talking about working with dogs and behavior, and we're talking about photography, but the themes still are so similar. There is a very sort of a macho, masculine approach to dealing with its dogs, breeds like pit bull, um, and there is a pervasive belief that uh some dogs need tougher ways, right? and and the voices of those of us who come at this with a more softer approach or a more feminine energy to it, however you want to look at it, the we're almost ignored. It's made to believe we're silenced. So just the way you've been experiencing it, Sophie, we've kind of seen this as well. We're silenced, we're ridiculed, but also we're largely ignored. And and it's such a large social problem, because if I remember somebody asking, so why don't we make a TV show out of what you do? And the truth is that, if I showed you, a TV show of what I'm doing, it's not, it's a slow healing process. There's nothing to see. There is a slowness to it. There's a gentleness to it. There's a softness to it, which is also considered boring. It's not sexy. It's not TV worthy. And so, what people seem to want to consume and is really I mean, there are labels associated to this, right? We are not taught there, we don't have the eye to look at slowness and softness and appreciate that. Rather, our eye and the way our brain works is we see softness and immediately some form of ridicule goes to the mind. They're lazy, they're slow, they're inefficient, this is silly, this is, girly. I mean, there's all these labels, they just stuff in, and you then dismiss it off as not serious, not relevant. And I think this is the whole intersectionality of what we do with animals and feminism, right? And feminist literature talks about this, and it's just, it flows all over the place. It's like my mind starts swimming in this, and you see it everywhere. And that too, as women working with animals, we see it coming at us from every angle. And I feel like screaming from the top of my lungs that, give your softness a chance to work with animals. It works so well. Don't let society tell you otherwise, right? Give your softness a chance. It is. I recently I was conducting this workshop, I think the one that Sophie mentioned. I just concluded it, and somebody asked me, is it possible to build relationships, sort of repair broken trust and build relationships? And it's like, absolutely, this is what we do. Have faith in relationship building, have faith in those kind of aspects of yourself. um and don't sort of don't let this conditioning tell you that everything that is worth producing through masculine ways, through steps, through reasoning. Bring the softness in, and it has true value.
And it's so interesting that you talk about, like, you know, like the definition of production, right? Because I was reading something recently, and the author spoke about how the definition of productivity has also become extremely patriarchal and capitalist, right? And in its original form, it was really about offering care. It was really about, you know, life affirming. It was really about nurturing. And those are all feminine attributes.
Yeah.
And so, you have capitalism and patriarchy sort of overtaking that completely and making it this very, like, aggressive, dominant kind of, very gendered piece. And in that process, I think so many of the things that women traditionally have done to pretty much hold the world together, like, have actually, like, taken a back seat, especially in terms of acknowledgement, recognition, just seeing the value of that, right? And I think again, even in my own journey, like when I think about uh, extending the BHARCS way to Mutton, who was my pit bull, I think I was one of the first people in my immediate shelter environment who was doing that kind of work. Up until then, the breed agenda for pit bulls was spray dry training, choke collars, prong collars, restriction, a lot of the alpha nonsense that went out there. And I think in the first year or so, I think there was a lot of flack for treating my dog as an individual being, for treating my dog with softness, for saying, okay, let's talk about what are your needs, how do I build trust, right? And so I feel like it's so yeah, it's just so chaotic, and I think it comes down is, I think it's painful, I think, after a point, to constantly try to, like, fight for that softness And I think, like, I particularly find it, the part that now I'm finding really difficult in my work is to say, oh, here's evidence for softness, you know, where I'm just like, why should I have to substantiate this with anything? Why can't it just be, this is my way of working, and this is what I think builds long-lasting relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just about, like you said, it's not just about suppression or, not getting recognized for the care work or this what is considered softer work, but really it's more than that, right? It's more insidious than that. It's pushback, it's severe criticism, it's constant kind of belittling and, pulling down careers. I mean, it's seriously threatening somebody out there, right? Because it's not just ignoring, saying, it's kind of irrelevant. There's more than that. It's a kind of a very systemic pushback on it, which makes one wonder who is so afraid of this and why.
Yeah, I will say, if I can jump in too, we see it at a global scale, also at a political level. Why do we keep getting these more and more authoritative men come to power? We see it in all the countries, like this rise of dominance and capitalism and violence and oppression of everybody. Uh, it's I agree with you, Sindhu. There's something about why is softness so threatening, and who is it threatening to? And I think that's when you know I like to talk about ecofeminism in that aspect, because that's how I think I relate my work to ecofeminism, an intersectional version of ecofeminism, of course. But it's really this idea of everything that we do, production, the way we treat dogs, the way we breed them, the way we train them, everything is through that prism of patriarchy. And here we are, ecofeminists, because I guess I'm sure you feel, from what I hear you say, you align with the idea also that we can foster a gentler approach to the natural world and to each other. Why is this so threatening? And why are we getting such a pushback at every level on this, when it feels to me that everybody would benefit, except maybe the few at the top that only profit from a system that oppresses everybody else? But at the very least, when it comes to dog training or dog relationships, it feels to me would be easy enough to implement, but no, you get a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's at all levels, right? Look at it, it's at a political level, we're talking about it, at countries, and then it's at a social level, and it's so ingrained that day to day, the way we lead our lives, you know we we have become we have grown to hate the soft side so much that if it's in us, if we're born women, and if it's in us, we just don't want to be us, and we want to be, my God, I think it's seeped into everything. It's infused in the air.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you said, right, Sophie, about, like, just, I think, growing up also within a patriarchal system. And I think even for us here in India, and I think a lot of us, again, have grown up in very similar systems, exposed to very similar systems and ideas. I think there's also this conditioning that we sort of develop to say that, like, okay, I'll speak from my experience. I think this conditioning of, do I matter enough, right? Do I hold space? Can I take up space within this larger system, right? And I think what has been really interesting is that through reconnecting with that softness with dogs, I have realized that yes, I can take up space, right? What is that? What does that agency and autonomy for me look like, really, in this process, right? And I think that, and the reason why I wanted to share that is because I think it's I understand how so many of us can become oblivious to that conditioning and oblivious to that brainwashing that happens. But I think when we especially, I think, connect with our dogs at a deeper level, it becomes very hard to ignore that. It becomes very hard to not come in touch with those aspects, both for the dog and for ourselves. And this actually reminds me of something that you had said in an interview, where you said, how you now look at dogs and you just want to sort of like apologize to them. You feel really apologetic towards them. And that, I love the line that you said. You said, we talk about dogs being a man's best friend, but are we their best friend? And that was so powerful. And it's such an uncomfortable question to ask, right? So I just wanted to know a little bit of like, where did that emerge for you from?
Yeah, I feel like because there is such a vested interest in the dog industry, because there's a lot of money at stakes, there are a lot of egos playing the field, right? We tend to accept or promote a lot of very abusive things under the cover of, but they are best friends. We have this special love relationship. Love becomes, the mountain that hides all the crap that we're doing. Because we love our dogs, we make decisions for them on their behalf without really considering them. So I'm asking, what kind of love is it really? How do you define love in a relationship that seems awfully one-sided? It's not one-sided because dogs, of course, express love too, but yeah, I do feel like we use the best friend argument to justify a lot of really, really problematic things, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a paper. I must send that to you because it's the exact question that I ask in the paper, which is what is love when we use the word love to describe our relationship with dogs? Because it seems to be that we love them until my baby is allergic to them and then I'll return them. We love them until it's not convenient for me to leave them around the house and therefore I'll put them in a small cage and keep them locked up half of the day. We love them until, and because I love them and I'm doing this from a place of love and it's good for them, and you say, hey, they don't like being confined in small spaces, and produce the evidence and this and that and whatnot. And despite that, at the end of the day, the argument is, well, but if we let him free, he's going to go and eat a battery. And so it's for his own good that I'm going to keep him locked up and caged up all day long. Right. And this love argument is really used and abused in such so many ways when it comes to dogs, that I feel like, and it extends, it's not just the documentary, right? It extends into science too. So when I was writing this paper on crating and caging dogs, and I was looking for evidence of how it impacts their stress levels, I found extraordinary amount of data about how confinement impacts stress levels of all other animals. But dogs, we don't seem to really want to ask that question. And even when we ask that question, we want to ask about them in testing environments, in shelters, but we don't even want to ask about it in homes. And did you know, for instance, that in the testing environment, what is considered a acceptable size of cage or crate is a fraction of, I mean, it's not what we use in our house is not even a fraction of that. So these boxes that we put them in our homes are really it would not pass any test. It would really not pass any test. But we don't want to ask that question of home dogs because, hey, we love them, right? And so the paper was really about, why do we not want to ask this question? What kind of a love is this? Is this love that is love until it's convenient? And then this kind of brings up this whole idea of the animal mirror, right, that we've been talking about for a while. So it's this mirror that you hold up to yourself to see who you are. If you're defining love that way, is that your relationship with love? Is that what you think about love? Is that how you experience love? you know has love been transactional for you? Is that how you've experienced interspecies relationships? And so, yeah, I mean, it brings up so many questions that, yeah,
I
very
think, yeah,
uncomfortable ones. Yeah, but I must send you that paper. I think you'll enjoy it.
yeah, or not. I mean, your paper I will enjoy, but the themes it brings up for me
Yeah, yeah,
might be
yeah,
challenging.
no,
But I think
yeah,
also a step further with the love that what you're describing is also, I want to hug my dog and he's
yeah,
being annoying.
yeah,
That part for me, I've been thinking a lot about consent and body
yeah,
autonomy in the relationship. And I realized, how many times have I picked up my dog and kissed him in the face, even though he's going like this? He doesn't want to be kissed, but
Yeah.
I want to be held. I want to be kissed. I want that physical contact. I mean, in a way, the relationship between the dog and a person is erotic, might not be the word. I might like
Yeah.
but it's very physical. It's very, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of hormonal things that's happening.
Yes.
And so how do we draw those lines? And I've been trying to include more consent in the way I interact with my dog, even at that level. And at first he was like, come here. And he doesn't want to come. And it's like, oh, great. Like, it makes me feel sad and neglected, right? But little by little, it's incredible the freedom that it has given him. And now he chooses when he wants to. And our relationship is so much more beautiful, and it's so much more rewarding when he chooses to interact in that way with me. And it feels
Yeah.
like it's a two-way, relationship. And so love, yeah, it's about what we do with them, to them, the way we control their environment, their life and everything, and put them in a cage or whatever. And it's also about the relationship we have between us and what they're allowed to express or not, and how they can show their love for us. I think a lot of dogs that I've met in shelters sometimes had been returned because people didn't feel that love that they were expecting. Oh, he never wants to cuddle, and it's like, it's harder for us to bond with an animal if they're not going to be at our disposal, every time we want a hug or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. And if we say it that way around human beings, it can sound so disturbing, right? So
Yeah.
I know that, it is not unheard of, because there are parts of the world where women have so little agency that the men will actually say, I get to touch you when I want to touch you. And you will show me the affection the way I want you to show affection. And now, when we say it that way, for those of us who don't come from those kind of, families, immediately it's cringe. Oh my God, that's flat out abuse. Why shouldn't animals have body autonomy enough to say, hey, this is my body, you get to touch it when I'm okay with it? you know so now, the dogs that I have on my side, I don't really have these dogs anymore. They have me, because I don't my last companion dog passed away in November. You might know, Chiru passed away. She's my companion dog, she's my partner. I've lost her, and so there are 4 dogs on the farm now. They hang out here. They're free living dogs. They come here, and we're still trying to figure out where this relationship is going. If anybody is having anybody owning anybody, and I don't think that's on the cards really. Uh, but one of them is showing a lot of promise in terms of wanting to become my dog, I think. So
Yay.
um and what's interesting about her is she allows a lot of touch, and she has a lot of trust in me. So I pulled out a brush. I said, okay, guys, if you're going to be hanging out so close to me, I'm going to be cleaning some of you. Okay. So I pulled out a brush, and they looked at it and they were like, what is this thing? So all of them ran away. But Chaita, the one who wants to kind of move in with me, she was like, okay, I'll let you try it. So I've been trying it on her. I had to show it to her, and I had to, sort of be gentle with her. And then the others have been observing, and then they come and ask sometimes, okay, will you try that on me as well? And so this is the work of consent that we talk about when we talk about, consent based treatments, consent based grooming. And these dogs are really putting it to the test, because I have no option here other than do it with consent. If I cross the line once, they're not coming back to my property for the next 1 week, and I cross it twice and they're not coming back, period. Right? So I cannot cross the line with them, and I have to learn this. And I'm sitting here, and it's quite joyous actually to figure this out. Like you said, you figure it out, and then you let her brush her, and then she realizes, she's like, oh, so it's this thing. And she turns around and she says, will you do it there, because it hurts? And she's leaning in, and there is so much joy in this, because not only is she allowing me to touch her, she's also understanding how my touch can help her, and is asking me to touch her in a place that is painful for her, saying, I now trust you that your skill is going to help me in this place. And this is what we do in myotherapy, right? We see these dogs do it all the time. And then the best part about all of this is I finished this whole session with her today. So I showed her that I could massage her as well. So I did all of this. And every dog I've done this to does this. She turned around, she puts her head on my chest, she stays there for a few minutes, licks my face. It's almost as if to say, thank you. That felt great. And then she's
I
off.
love that. I
And
love that so much.
that feeling, you're not going to get that feeling anywhere else. And it's really what we do at BHARCS is an invitation to say, come discover that, because it feels so good to do this. It feels so, I, I hate using this word because it's so overloaded, but it feels spiritual. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is why your work is extraordinary and so important. And I'm really grateful that we have you in the dog world.
Yeah, same here though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's beautiful because, I mean, just to kind of bounce that back towards shelter dogs, for example, that's something I tell people a lot. Like, if you're going to buy from a breeder, the dog does not have a say at all. You order it on the catalog, and I say it because to me, like,
Yeah.
the breeder dog is an object that is, there's a transaction that happens there, and a female body is being exploited for you to have a puppy. If you go to the shelter, they have a chance to have a say a little bit. You meet them maybe in the greet room, and then you sit there and they can decide, okay, they can sniff you, say, oh, it wouldn't be too bad to live with you, maybe. What if we fostered that? More
Yeah.
agency for shelter dogs to pick their people as much as they're being picked. And I think a lot of shelters are very cognizant of that, and they make effort towards that, but I think that's definitely something I would encourage every shelter worker to focus on too, is let the dog also have a say. And that's why fostering, I think, is great. And so I think your work is so interesting in that, because sometimes I like to fantasize about a world where if we went back to the beginning, or like, how do we would have to work for that friendship, and the dog would have an equal say. I mean, ideally, hopefully, unless they're tied up and whatever, right? But let's say in a softer, gentler approach to the natural world, we have to work for it, and they get to say yes or no. How are you going to navigate that relationship? I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the one of the workshop that I recently conducted, somebody asked me about getting obedience from their dog, and I was like, listen, you are already in a power structure with a dog in your home, right? Getting obedience out of that is no great shakes. This is not impressive. But if you can change that relationship to a point where that individual who has less power feels powerful enough to turn around and say no to you.
Yeah.
Can I touch you? No, because I have the confidence that when I say no, it will be respected. Now that's an interesting journey, and that is remarkable. That excites me. Come and tell me that I get obedience out of somebody I have power over. Like, duh, that's I'm sorry, but that's not impressive to me.
Don't put that on your Tinder profile. It's not gonna get
Yeah,
like,
but
share a video of you and your dog healing, like walking super narrowly
yeah,
next to you. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not really.
But Sophie, what you said about, like, if we were the fantasy that you have, right? And I think it's so interesting because I feel like when you're around, like, nobody puts you in your place other than like free living dogs, right? And we call them streeties essentially, right? Street dogs to streeties, and that's an affection term that we use. And I remember, like, when I was doing a diploma with Sindhoor, and we had a full exercise of go try and bite a dog and see if they want to sort of engage with you. And I sent her a video of a dog who was just not interested in talking to me. And she was just like, I love this. Like, this is what you have to learn, right? And I think I love that idea of, like, working for that friendship, because when you put it in that context with free living dogs, right, where they have choice, where they have agency, where they have freedom, you cannot think about building a relationship without thinking about trust, without thinking about agency, without thinking about autonomy, without thinking about, you know, how do I make myself feel valuable enough for you to connect with me, right? Like you cannot not think about some of those things. And I think that it's just, of course, at BHARCS, we talk so much about, they're a very, very important part of our learning. And so I think something that automatically also comes up is how underrepresented, but also misrepresented they are in the larger narrative on dogs, right? Like when we think about behavior, when we think about nutrition, when we think about everything, just whatever we know about what does it mean to peacefully coexist with dogs, it's never really about free living dogs. It's everything has to do with dogs who are in your control, in your home, where you can exercise that power dynamic. And I think a part of me now, and maybe this is a little bit of a late realization, is that a part of me is now started thinking that it is not necessarily coming from a place of ignorance. I think there is very intentional misrepresentation and underrepresentation of that, because how do we hold space to talk about freedom and agency with another animal when our entire so-called culture or the entire system is focused on control and power and that dynamic?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in how colonialism impacts dogs and their communities, right? That's a theme I'm so interested in. It's a little hard for, especially a white person, to work on something like this. There's a lot to navigate there, and I'm trying to be very mindful. But I think when you look at humans have colonized dogs as a species, right? And so when you look at it through that prism, it gives you a lot of interesting answers. And breeding in particular is such, I mean, for me, it's like such a strong symbol of especially the way we breed dogs, the breeds we create, the way we're making them less and less functional, brachycephalic dogs in particular, which are at the heart of a really heated conversations around the world. I think it's a subject I'm very passionate about. And if you allow me to elaborate a little bit on brachycephalic dogs, so flat-nosed dogs, I had a conversation once on social media, and I was talking about how they are bred to not being able to function and breathe normally. And in a way, it keeps them under control, to go back to this idea, right? And somebody said, oh, wow, that reminds me of how women had to wear corsets and they couldn't breathe and they would have these fainting spells, and we kept them controlled like that. And so to go back to ecofeminism, or the way of a gentler approach, and the way women have been oppressed and some groups have been oppressed, kind of mirrors the way we oppress dogs, right? It's very similar. We are breeding them to have control over their bodies, and by extension their life, their agency, their everything. And we breed them sick, we breed them intentionally or not. I mean, I think in the case of brachycephalic dog, it's very intentional, whether or not those breeders want to acknowledge it. You are purposely breeding dogs that are going to struggle. Most of them are going to struggle greatly their whole life because of the way their bodies are built, right? But with German Shepherd, they all have hip dysplasia. So we are breeding dogs that are, the way we're approaching breeding is very detrimental to dogs. And so in my mind, we have colonized that species, and what are the consequences, and how can we remedy that? And maybe also, I mean, living in the Western world, I think here, it's unfathomable that a dog should be a free living dog. I mean, in the US, you wouldn't, and so we shove them in cages, in shelters instead. And there's this control over that is, I mean, after 10 years of working with shelters, I really struggle seeing another dog in a cage. Let's put it that way, which is why I've switched a little bit to working with free living dogs and exploring that instead the past few years, because I just couldn't take it anymore. You walk in the shelter and to see the distress that's coming at you. And so I know the free living situation is not perfect and comes with their own set of challenges, but I'm very interested in that. And where's the middle ground, and how do we make it work for everybody involved, the dogs and the communities that share space with these dogs? I went a little bit all over the place, sorry. Like, I don't know where you want to, but there's just so much.
Yeah. Surabhi, is there anything specific of this you'd like me to pick on?
Pick on anything that your heart's telling you to pick
Oh
on,
my God.
Sindhoor.
Oh my God. I mean, all these points,
Yeah.
right? There is, of course, there is colonization, and colonization not just in terms of breeding, but a lot of colonization that happened in countries like India had to do with the idea of, here is the sovereign that owns this land. What does owning the land mean? Every person, every human will behave the way we want them to. Every blade of grass will be in the place we wanted to say. We will grow trees that we like. We will, and that is the colonization of the land, right? Everything will be in its place, and we decide what is where. And so domestic animals are separated out, wild animals are separated out, and everybody has to stay in their places, and there is this natural reserve, and these wild animals are for us to put in our menageries and show it to the world. Look how large our colonies are, toss in a few human beings there as well, and my colony versus your colony, kind of this terrible, disgusting thing that was happening. And I talk about this in my workshops a lot. And here came along this little dog, this free living dog that said, your rules of colonization don't work on me. I'm not domestic and owned, and I'm not wild. I occupy a liminal space, an in between space that breaks your brains, and you're not able to understand the space that I occupy. And and so this was clearly highly problematic for the British Raj when they were there in India, because there was, very focused culling programs that were born during the British Raj. And it's a, the remarkable work of some communities in India, particularly the Parsi community, which is, it's a very surprise element there, that they kind of bring in this thing into the post independence attitude towards in India, towards dogs in India. And thankfully, that translated to a certain amount of constitutional protection for free living dogs in India, which is great. But that didn't change the social attitudes, because we did, and we still do have a massive colonial hangover, as I say. So, there are these ideas that we have picked up, from our colonial overlords, that we don't seem to want to let go. And we're constantly aspiring to be, them. And a big part of that is get rid of the street dogs. I mean, I am forever in debt of the countless number of activists who kind of push back and make sure that their rights are upheld. And this argument that is always given, we like to shoot from the shoulders of this animal welfare, right? So the argument that is given to get rid of street dogs is, it's for their own welfare, terrible things are happening. Now, I live on a farm. Terrible things happen to snakes, terrible things happen to peacocks, terrible things are. So what is it? Human beings are terrible. We do terrible things to every other species. So what is the rule now? The only way we will allow you to survive is if you're owned by us and caged by us and captured by us, and anything else is, oh, life is terrible for you, so don't live it. uh, that's that argument hold to humans too? Do we say, oh, your life is terrible, so don't live it? Sophie opened with the idea of dignity, right? So there is dignity. Are there some lives seen less worthy of living because they're not pleasant to our eyes? Is that uh, kind of jarring our comfort? And our comfort is so upfront and center that we just want to get rid of these lives because we don't want to see them around, because they're not as pretty as we think they are. What if we ask the street dog, do they enjoy their life? Is a street dog capable of experiencing joy? Heck yeah. How many times have we seen that? Is a street dog capable of experiencing love, connection? I see these dogs, I document them, I write about their stories, and those who attend my classes are regaled by their stories. They have friends, they have enemies, they have politics, they're busy all day doing very important things, and they seem terribly happy about it. Yes, there are times when they are heartbroken. One of the puppies behind my house, a snake bit her and she died. And the mother and the daughter were heartbroken for a while. But that doesn't make any of their lives less worth living, simply because we can't see this. And this wonderful gift of colonialism that has taught us that, you know, cultured living is about severing your relationship with nature and overcoming it, and you are now leading a civilized life, and there's no place for these kind of animals, these kind of liminal lives in civilized life. And so, oh my god, there are like so many concepts that come into play here. We can go on and on about it, but yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up. And it's so I know that what's happening in Turkey is kind of really heartbreaking for all of us. And when I saw you put up the post about it, I was thinking to myself that, what's happening is heartbreaking, but the hope is that there are more people willing all over the world, willing to fight for these vulnerable animals. And that is the hope. And we need to find each other. We need to hold each other, because we're the ones willing to do it, and we're not alone. I think we need to be told that we are not alone. Many of us feel that their lives are worth living and worth fighting for.
Yeah. I want to actually leave you with a last question. And actually, this came up as I was listening to the two of you talk, and if why is it important, I think, to think about dogs and our relationship with them in so many layers? Because I'm wondering, right? I'm sitting and listening to the two of you talk, and I'm wondering, I'm sure, Sophie, for you as well, I think you would have had people say, oh, but, why are you talking about so many things? You just had to take photographs of a dog. Or, even for you, Sindhoor, I think, why do you have to talk about so many things? Just get my dog to stop, behaving the way that they're behaving. But what makes it important to think about these systemic pieces? What makes it important to think about these relationships critically? And the reason why I ask this is because I recognize that so many people who share lives with dogs, so many people who work with dogs are also on a journey, right? And I think that for some of them, there are inklings for some of these ideas and conversations. For some of them, the doors are completely shut. But I think that as we continue to sort of, talk about what does it mean to be part of a community that is holding each other together, what does it mean to be loved and affirmed and cared for together in these ways. I think it's hard to do that if we're not all thinking about similar things, right? If we're not meeting at some middle ground. And so why is it important? Why does it matter?
I'll
Should I
let
go
Sophie go.
first?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay,
Surabhi
I'll
gave
try
me strict
to.
instructions that that
This is
that we let
a
Sophie
big.
talk first, because I am notorious for talking endlessly. So I understand it. I take no offense at it, and I'm going to be a good girl and absolutely let you
Wow,
do your
Sindhu,
thing.
those were not instructions at all.
You can actually go first. I also talk endlessly, so. um, so I do think that some people have that brain and personality, and some don't. For me, I just couldn't live my life any other way. I'm a seeker. I like to understand things and poke at them from different angles. I love nuanced thinking. I love to challenge the status quo. So I was born like this. I don't know if it's something you can teach someone. I think maybe it's a personality trait. I would say for me, it's very important to move in the world with intention and not just let yourself be bounced around by systems that have been put in place long before you were born or even an idea of being born. Move with intention. Purpose-driven work is very important to me. So using photography, it's a huge responsibility. Photography has such power that from the start, I knew I wanted to use it ethically. I wanted to use it with purpose to make a difference in the world, to help bring up the voices of others and dogs in particular. There is actually in my book, my Pitbull Flower Power book, I opened it with a quote, which I thought was really on the nose because it's a quote from Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince. He's actually from my hometown, so I don't feel too bad about using a quote from that book that's been overused. But he says in English, basically, you are responsible forever for what you have tamed. And when I was working on the book and I was looking for a quote, I thought, this is perfect because we have created this problem. It's not a problem, but it's becoming a problem in many aspects of their lives for them, for dogs. But we chose to do this. We chose to partner, to coexist, to co-evolve. Every step of the way, we made decisions for them on their behalf, not always in their best interest. And so what does that look like to move in the world intentionally, responsibly, with ethics, and making sure we don't center ourselves, but we center the other into the world that we design? What does that look like? I think that's important. I think that's also how we make change. I think we need to rely more and more on community and cooperation because the systems that have been designed are not in our best interest. They're not in the interest of the dogs and the natural world. And so community is more important than ever, I think, right now. We see it at every level of the political, everything. So let's start with dogs and how do we foster that community and prompt change that I think can ripple with everything. People often tell me, like, why do you focus on dogs? Like, why don't you speak about something else? I'm like, because dogs are everything.
Yeah.
Dogs is the intersection of everything. The natural world, the pets, politics. What's happening in Turkey is very political. They use dogs as a political pawn. So I think it touches on the oppression of groups, of like everything. So why wouldn't we look at dogs? And I'm glad we finally seeing more studies and more researchers focusing on dogs, because I think it used to be this, oh, you're working with dogs? Lame. It's this little thing that nobody cares about. It's the biggest thing. It's the link between everything. So I'm super passionate about it. I don't think I'll stop working with dogs and about dogs for the rest of my life. And that won't even be enough to cover it all. So I'm going to zip it. The floor is yours.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. I love the way you say dog. It's at the intersection of everything, right? That's actually beautiful. I think that's exactly the way I feel. And one of the things that we do at BHARCS, I think, which keeps coming back to us, is a lot of the work that we do, which is based on relationships and based on trust and based on secure attachments and things like that. And invariably, people come back and say, "Oh, but this has changed me. This has changed who I am." Because that's really and more recently there was somebody who came and said, I think I'm going to quit my job after listening to you talk, because I work for an oil company. And so it's really the application, like you said, it's really sort of one end of the string, but when you start working on it, you start sort of getting exposed to so many different aspects of your own lives. You start seeing reflections in of who you are. You start understanding yourself better. You start understanding how you do relationships and what keeps you from doing relationships. And at the end of the day, I lost my husband 3 years ago, and I've been really introspecting about the meaning and purpose of life, right? Because I don't have any other family, sort of immediate family. And so why am I here? And is it about money? Is it about fame? And all of those things start crumbling away once you go through something like this, and you realize, none of those matter in the end. None of them are giving you joy when you're kind of broken down and you're bawling. And then you realize what matters is the beauty of the relationships that you experience at a given point in time. The 10 minutes that I spent, brushing Chaita and her saying thank you to me, and that is it. That is all life is about. There's nothing bigger and grander, and you're not getting memorialized, and all of these grand ideas that we're sold. It's all bogus, right? None of that is happening, right? And if you don't live those lives moment by moment, eh, there will come a day when it's too late to do all of that, and you realize that you've just been on this wheel and ignoring all those around you. And if you want to actually start living this truly, like Sophie said, move intentionally, do things slowly, look at the relationships around you, do them more mindfully. And I think dogs are so great at this. They're like, yes, we can try this out, and I will give you a platform to try this out, and I'll give you a platform to work on your relationship, just but we got to do that kindly. I don't mean like experiment on them, like please don't. That's not what I mean really. But they're just so willing to do this, so willing to do this. God bless them. I don't know why they give us this chance, but they're so willing to do this with us. I think it can really unlock a beautiful journey. So for me, it's less and less about kind of, you know, what we owe to the world, and it's more and more about giving access to that wonderful experience within. And I really hope that if I really feel like if everybody could do that and start healing themselves, which is big part of this process, also healing, right? We probably will start fixing a big part of the problems of the world. So much of our world leaders ego problems are coming from unhealed souls, right?
Daddy issues.
Yes. I was trying not to say it. But
And mommy issues, let's be honest.
yeah. And so for me, it's such a large thing. Like Sophie said, I think it's at the center of everything, and it transcends everything, and it's at the foundation of everything. It's just so powerful. Yeah. I'll stop now.
And yeah, no, I think for American listener that don't have access to free living dogs necessarily, foster dogs.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, you'll find out a lot about yourself. The first time I fostered a dog, I sobbed for a week, disheveled in dirty hair and pajamas I hadn't changed in days. And I was like, what did I do to my life? And it brought me back to motherhood and how I had to make the decision to not have children because of a lot of variables, but mostly because I didn't trust my motherhood instinct. And to be confronted to it via foster dogs was a huge piece for me, And so I think experiencing free living dogs or fostering a bunch of dogs and just it's challenging, but it's so powerful to learn about yourself. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew. How many more hours do we have? Because I have more ideas.
No, but seriously, Sindhoor, Sophie, thank you so much for this conversation. Like, I feel like one, obviously, time flew by really quickly, but I think that we touched upon so many important and critical themes to just the larger, I think, narrative on dogs and the way that we share our lives with them. And I really want to thank the two of you for just being really open and vulnerable and honest, and hopefully really uninhibited in sharing your perspectives. But I do feel like we need to do like multiple parts of this and like deeper dives into each of these themes. But I think that this was just incredible. So thank you so much to the two of you for being here.
Thank you so much, Surabhi. I'm really glad that we did this, and I really want to thank Sophie as well. I've been wanting to do this with you. We've been chatting about all of these ideas so much, so it was kind of high time that we, I think, met at least on Zoom. We will meet in person soon.
Yes.
But and the work that you do, it's just so moving. I'm just glad that I get to know somebody like you in my lifetime and witness and behold what you do. It's just remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you. And I feel the same about your work. I'm really, again, really grateful that you are in this world with us. And I get to share this this timeline with someone like you. And thank you. Such an honor to be here with both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. All right. With that, we will bring the episode to a close, and hopefully, Sophie and Sindhoor will have you back again for another incredible conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.